Excuse me, I did phone Graham and Sharon said he's recovering slightly.
Yes.
Is David alright? Because we
his back's quite bad. When was that?
I saw David today.
Okay, okay.
And
Lewis?
How did you go?
it seemed alright. It seemed alright, but then, you know, yeah.
It's good days and bad days, you know.
Oh.
See, on Sunday when you said, and Graham's got the cold, do you know what I mean? Yeah, or flu, whatever.
Yeah.
I seen myself. Graham looks alright.
He
said
Graham.
Confusion reigns.
Graham, that's Graham number one.
Graham number one.
One's Graham, and that he misses the H.
Okay, anyway, I do go. Yeah, alright. Anyway, we looked at the first 5 books last week, and we're continuing that. Just a snippet on each book. There's a taste, Joshua. He's famous for fitting the Battle of Jericho, isn't he? Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho. Fought. Anyway, obviously, an interesting character. Was the commander of Moses' army, and then when Moses was left behind, he was given the job by God to take his people into the land of Canaan, and the book of Joshua then reveals the conquest in different parts of the land and the different things that he did, and all through. So it's quite an interesting book, quite a lot of action in it, some interesting little snippets of characters turn up, and they do a good job overall. You see them trusting God and being blessed, and you see them deciding to do their own thing and getting tramped on. And you see, like the sin of Ai, you see somebody who's a bit greedy, and it really has an impact on lots of people. Because obviously, just like in Acts chapter 5, or thereabouts, you have a situation where going into the promised land is the beginning of the people really coming together as a nation, and therefore God is going to be fairly straight with them to sort out problems before they start. And so the situation with Ai turns out to be quite a difficult situation, and what would you say, the consequences of Ai's sin seem a little bit excessive, but realistic. So following the book of Joshua, where they actually take the land, and you've got living in the land. And this is an interesting, this book helps me almost on a daily basis with the idea that's behind it. God's people seem to find it difficult to remain faithful, and so they go into a decline. And then God has to raise up somebody to encourage them to get back right with God, and when they can do that, they become victorious again, they get their act together, and everything's fine. But they call it a cyclical book. It's not a big book you read on your bike, but it's a cyclical book. So, you know, this seems to go in cycles. And it's almost like every generation has its trauma, and it's refinding God and allowing God back into their lives, and then back on the proper role again. So that book helps me to understand when some people, strong people, seem to lose faith and end up in a mess. That's really a historical reality. People have difficulty in staying faithful for very long. We lose that, we forget where we came from, and therefore, because we forget where we come from, we lose direction. And so that's helpful in helping me to cope with my life as well as other people's lives, and recognise that there's times when we need encouragement. There's times when we need to be encouragers, because nobody stays at the same plateau, where we're either moving forward or we're slowly slipping back. And there's a kind of cyclical effort in that. And so we can see in our own lives where we've been very strong in some areas and where we've been very weak in other areas. And this book helps me to rhyme. We're human beings. The other thing it helps us to realise is there's lots of people struggle in exactly the same way we do. And God continue to bless them, work with them, and help them to be strong again. So that's a positive out of that as well. But I like the book of Judges. There are lots of interesting characters turn up in there as well. Ruth, beautiful pastoral story. Ruth appears as ancestress of David and Jesus Christ. Ruth wasn't a Jew.
Moabite.
A Moabitess. If you remember back in Moses married a Moabite. Again we see God blessing somebody who wasn't actually of the Jewish nation, and yet through her, she's part of the ancestry that we see and later on bring about David and ultimately the Christ. So interesting story, powerful story as well. And it's interesting because in a male-dominated world, she's the heroine, which is interesting. You see God helping us to appreciate that there's lots of good women out there with lots of good abilities. Matter of fact, back here in Judges, you've got Deborah, a tremendous woman, does a great deal of good. So you see God using different people in different times. 1st and 2nd Samuel, by the time of Judges there, the people get a little bit dejected. They see lots of powerful nations round about them, and they think, well, why can't we have a king like everybody else? Well, they've got a king, haven't they? Gods have been their king. But they decide, it's Samuel the prophet, to say, well, we want a god we want a king like everybody else. And so Samuel thinks it's them. It's him that's been the problem. And God says, no, it's not you, it's the problem. They're rejecting me. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And he tells them plainly. He said, you want a king? It'll cost you. You know what a king does? A king looks at your finest women. A king looks at your getting a cut out of your income. A king looks at building himself palaces, and who's going to pay for that? A king looks at extravagant lifestyle, and who's going to pay for that? Well, you want a king? Well, you've got to realise it comes with consequences. But despite that, they want a king. And of course, we have Saul. He was chosen to be king. And one of the things, he was a typical, it was a really, if you like, from a man's perspective, he was the right king for the job. Because one of his qualifications was he stood head and shoulders above everybody else. He was a massive man. It's interesting, down in history, lots of people in places of importance in history have been tall people. Because people look up to them. Well, they've got no option, have they? If you're tall, if you're short, you've got to look up to them. But it's also interesting that the time David comes along, that God wants him to learn a different kind of lesson. Because David, you don't look on the outside. He says you look in the heart. And so David became king because his heart was right. And God helped us to appreciate some of that benefits. And sometimes when we judge people, when we look at people, we look at the externals. He's a fine looking guy and all that. But really, what's his heart like? And that's really the key at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting. The origin of the word king is the one who can.
The one who can. Well, Saul certainly would have fitted that,
Right,
If we want somebody to do our fighting for us, he's the one who can. I know when I was reading English history about the Saxons and a little bit further on, a lot of our kings were kings who were out there on the front line of the battle. They were leader kings.
That's right.
You don't see them. You don't see the kind of leaders that we have today who sit away miles away from any action and say, "Okay, go out there, send them out there and do this and do that next thing." These guys would actually, they would be fighting at your side. They would be fighting in front of you, and that's the kind of king you want. You want to see somebody who's leading from the front. Alexander the Great was typical of that, wasn't he? So anyway, David and also later on we have Solomon comes along. So the early history of the kingdom of Israel, that's probably to me 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and 1st and 2nd Kings are the most complicated books of the Bible. When they're written in the way they are, if you have a chronological Bible, sometimes that makes it a little bit easier because you can see the Bible chopping from here, from a northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, the northern king to a southern king, a northern situation, these tribes and what's happening around it, a southern situation with the tribe, and sometimes they've even got the same name. So you think, who am I reading about here? Is he one of the north, is he one of the south? It's really confusing until you get a hang of it. I've actually got if I live long enough, I've actually started a series on trying to, with the PowerPoint, trying to help you to understand where they all fit together. And until I did that, and I've been Christian for a long time, until I did that, it was about the first time I really begun to understand where things fitted. I needed to see it visually. Because reading it, you've got to know the text. Frank's good at it. On some of the audio files I've got Frank preaching on a study on the kingdom, and it is excellent. But you've got 40 odd kings, in the north and 40 odd kings in the south, and you don't know. Some of them got the same names, and the same things are happening, the same enemies, the same friends. What's going on here? It really can be
It's unfortunate they didn't each die at the same time.
Well, this is true.
Remember the same.
Yes. You have to get it chronologically sorted.
Leapfrogging.
Yeah. But it's very difficult. But there's lots of good stuff in there. If you like action, I've got some videos on, for example, like David and stuff like that, and it's all action and good stuff. And so it's well worth reading, even if you get confused by it. It's well worth the go, Books contain excellent deal about the reign of David and Solomon and the return from the captivity period. So this one, the latter one, just touches near the end of the captivity, whereas the first two are more in the beginning, the middle of the kingdom's reigns. Because the people wanted a king and they had that. Ezra, after they were carried off into Babylonian captivity, of course before that, 10 tribes from the 12 tribes were carried off into captivity by Assyria, and that was basically the end of the northern kingdom, and that left 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, to be the core through which Christ would come. And even them, because they were because they were idolatry and stuff like that. If you read a book like, later on we're going to come to Ezekiel and books like that, if you read them about the state of the nation, they were just at some points total idolatry. And God said, unless you get your act together, I'm going to carry you off to captivity. Of course, they didn't get their act together, so they were carried off to captivity. And God says basically to Jeremiah and Isaiah, mainly Jeremiah, he says, this is going to be good for you. This captivity is going to be good for you. As they'll leave it and destroy Jerusalem behind, as they'll leave a destroyed temple behind, and they're being carried off into captivity, the message of the prophet says, this is going to be good for you. This is going to help you get your act together. Suffering sometimes cuts away the dross, cuts through all the images that we conjure up of how good things are going, and we're left with the bedrock. And when we are at the bedrock, then there's only one way you can go from there, and that's up. And therefore God does that with his people when he carried them off to captivity in Babylon. And then he even tells them, he says, you're going to be here for a certain period of time, 70 years. And he even tells you, Cyrus is going to give a decree, and he's going to bring you back out. And Cyrus was not a Jew, he was a Persian. And he wasn't even born when that prophecy was made. And God says, you're going to be here for a certain amount of time. Cyrus is going to let you go back home. And Ezra is one of the guys who, when they do let him come back home, he's one of the mainstays who helped to rebuild the temple. And he's got, if you like, somebody else who's in the same kind of time scale, Nehemiah. And these two men are the real key elements to bring about the return of God's people back to their place, re-establishment of a new temple, re-establishment of Jerusalem, and re-establishment of the people of God back home, ready for the coming of the King, Jesus. Esther, another strange story. Jews under pressure. Jews have always been under pressure. Esther really is a story where Mordecai and Haman, Haman really conned the leader of his day into thinking the Jews are bad news, and the best he could do is wipe them out. And he prepared a gallows to be able to get the job done. But Esther came in and managed to get access to the king enough and the confidence of the king enough to be able to help him to understand that Haman was plotting to do this to the Jews. And so the good stuff is at the end that Haman ends up on his own gibbet, which is not good for him, but good news for the Jews. And so here was a situation which could have been devastating for the Jews, and God steps in through Esther and changes the thing back into what it ought to be. When we talk about the 5 major prophets, one of the best books, or one of the richest books, is the book of Isaiah. Beautiful book and lots of good stuff all the way through it. Certainly underread, I would think. It's one of the longer books in the Old Testament, 66 chapters. It's not easy in some areas, but it's got a lot of good stuff, and we should really spend more time with this kind of book. And poor old Jeremiah, you feel sorry for him. God's given him a message, and after being abused and stoned and all sorts of other stuff, the poor old guy thinks, I don't want to speak this message. And yet he gets to that point where he says, I've got to. And so the actual text says, my heart burns within me. I've got to tell these people that they're going off into captivity and God's still in control. And so out of this background again, the weeping prophet, because he really cared about his people. Isn't it tragic that Jesus said something similar in one of his stories in the Gospels? He said, time after time God sent men to you, and what did you do with them? You ended up stoning them and killing them. And here now he's sending his son, and what are you going to do? You're going to end up killing them. Okay? And the funny thing about that is, and later on in the Gospels, he turns around basically and he says, do you think we'll do any less than to you? You really want to follow me? If you really, touch the world, affect the world won't like it. And you may end up the same way as I am going to end up.
If they pay attention to Jeremiah, they wouldn't go looking for the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, that's right. Yeah,
he said that you no longer say the Ark. He said it will be no longer thought about, nor rebuilt, nor remade.
Right.
So it must have been destroyed when they started in captivity.
In captivity, yeah. There's lots of good stories coming out of that, looking for the Ark. And some people claim they've got it today, the Ethiopians.
They're still looking for it,
right? Now, Jeremiah, we talk about 5 major prophets, and we include those 5 major prophets in the book of Lamentations. And this was the second book that Jeremiah produced. And it's called Lamentations because it's a bunch of mournful songs. So you want to cheer it up on a nice day, certainly worth a read. But really the mournful songs because he didn't want to see his city destroyed. He didn't want to see his people destroyed. But the reality is, if that's the only way God can sort them out, that's what had to be done. But it broke his heart, really. But his book's really interesting, some really funny little things in there as he tries to get across to the people in sometimes quite visual forms what God's message is for them. And some of the things he ends up doing is amazing. And it's certainly worth a peruse through. It's a big book as well. Ezekiel, one of many people's favourite books in the Old Testament. Here he is, a real vision of God to start him off. It's interesting, this is another man, just like Jeremiah, who really didn't want to do the job. He didn't actually think that the people were that bad. And God had to show him in the first 8 chapters or so that really the people deserve to hear the message of the captivity. And they deserve to hear the message that they're going to be able to come back out. And so eventually God gets through to him that these people are idolatrous and that really deserve what they're going to get. But it takes a while to convince them of that. And you feel sorry for him as well, because in some parts of his life and some of the ways he's treated, it's quite bad news, really. But a good book, another good book of the Old Testament, another big book of the Old Testament. And these 3 are the, if you like, the main prophets that a lot of people talk about. And obviously you've got one more in there, the book of Daniel. This is a favourite book, a favourite stomping ground of practically everybody and their dog. Because poor old Daniel, he talks in a visionary sense. he's in captivity, and starts off with Nebuchadnezzar's dreams with a vision there, and then he, 3 different times, he says basically the same thing, using different imagery. One with the statue, first of all, that Nebuchadnezzar sees, and then later on he talks about leopards and something else. There's 4 different things that he shows the different nations, which is a repeat of what you see in Acts chapter 2, and then again he does it again. And there's lots of, he's the famous one for near the end, he talks about the time and half a time and all that type of stuff. People go, right, what's that all about? Well, and everybody speculates. Everybody in the dog speculates. But really, we don't need to worry about it too much. Then you're followed by the 12 minor prophets. Now, they're not necessarily minor in length. Some of them are minor prophets, are bigger than the major prophets. But they're minor in the sense of they don't have the same input from a personal story, if you like. We know a lot about Daniel in his life. We know a lot about Ezekiel in his life. And these guys, they've got a similar message. They've got a recognizing the idolatry of Israel, needing to get their act together, and as I say, Jesus said, you stoned them. These guys were really out to help you, but you just basically stoned them all the time. Joel, prophet of Judah, leading topic repentance, his blessing, the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is an interesting phrase. When you see it in some parts of the Bible, the day of the Lord, usually it involves judgment. And when God came in judgment against Egypt, or God came in judgment against some other, you talked about it as a day of the Lord. And Joel looking forward to the ultimate day of the Lord, the destruction of Jewish people, the end of the Jewish people. When God was going to bring judgment upon the Jews that didn't accept the Messiah. And so you see a day of the Lord judgment in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. But he uses this phrase, and lots of prophets use this phrase, the day of the Lord. So the time of judgment will be turned into a season of blessing. So for those who did accept the Christ, blessings can flow through it. Amos, interesting guy. He was from a more farming background, where he was a
shepherd.
Yeah, shepherd, and he also pruned. What did he prune? He pruned something of that. No, I can't remember what he pruned. He pruned something. But anyway, he's an interesting guy to read. Again, some of these guys, we know about them. Some of these books are so small, they're difficult to find in the Old Testament. You rattle through and you see, oh, there's big Isaiah, and there's big Jeremiah, and you flip over a couple of pages, you miss half of these, because they're small. Obadiah, the doom of Edom, as I said, the city of Petra, and above there, they look down from the eagle's eyrie, as the Bible says, and watch their own people, the Jews, being destroyed. So God says, look, you think you're safe up there. Your day is going to come, and ultimately he did. So Obadiah was talking about the doom of Edom and the Edomites. Jonah, the reluctant missionary, he was talking about better experience, lesser obedience, and depths of divine mercy. God says, I want you to go this way, and then the next thing you know, Jonah's going that way. God says, look, here, back up here. He really didn't want the city of Nineveh, he didn't really want these people to repent. He didn't want them to be saved. He didn't want them a second chance. And God says, you've got to give them a second chance. And he was really cheesed off when they took it. Good story. And again, sometimes, we think we know better than God.
Of course, he had no reason to love Assyria, had he?
No, he didn't.
He knew it was the capital of Assyria.
They were not nice people.
No, they weren't nice people.
They weren't nice people at all.
Nastiest in the Old Testament, actually.
Yeah. I definitely think they are. Micah, dark pictures of moral condition of Israel and Judah. You all right?
Worse than the Romans.
Oh, right. Goodness gracious me, they are. Dark picture of moral condition of Judah, but foretells the establishment of Messiah. So here he's saying, you guys are in a mess, but one day the Christ is going to come. So
Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Prophecy.
And Naaman, destruction of Nineveh. Judah has promised delivery from Assyria. Okay, so here's Assyria really had a big time span. Probably they were in and out of power over an 800-year period. And sometimes they're very, very, very powerful, and sometimes they're kind of just mediocre, seen in the background. And so at different times, different prophets dealt with some of the things they used to get up to. Habakkuk probably is, he's one of the prophets that's really helpful in a way, because sometimes we think we know better than God. And poor old Habakkuk was looking at his own people and he says, you guys are a mess. And he then turns around and basically says to God, God, what are you going to do about them? They're really a mess. And God says, okay, don't worry about it, I'm doing something about it. He said, well, you don't seem to be doing much about it. And God said, well, I'm going to bring the Chaldeans to sort them out. And he says, what? But they're even worse than we are. How can you do that? He says, stand back and watch, basically. That's basically what he says. He says, watch me. So Habakkuk stands in amazement as God works his magic and sorts out his people. Yeah, Zephaniah, somber book filled with threatenings, but in the end, a vision of the future glory of Israel. Okay? See, God's people are really a mess. You see?
I'm sorry, hang on. Somber. S-O-M-B-R-E.
Oh, like a hombre. Like a hombre. Sombre.
That's right.
Okay. Take a note of that. Somebody's dyslexic somewhere. Okay. Haggai, a colleague of Zechariah, he reproves the people for slackness in building the second temple. He promises a return of God's glory when the temple should be completed. In Ezekiel, you see the presence of God leaving his temple, and then you see God's blessing among his people once his temple is rebuilt. Zechariah, contemporary of Haggai, he helped arouse the Jews to rebuild the temple of Jerusalem. He saw the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom in a series of 8 visions. And finally, Malachi. Malachi gives a graphic picture of the closing people of the Old Testament story. He shows the necessity of reforms before the coming of the Messiah. You don't keep your act up. Get ready for God. It's coming. Okay? And we'll hold it there. And you've suffered enough in the cold. You think so?
No, he just had on there.
Malachi?
No, it just came up there, the New Testament ones, right?
I spelled that wrong?
You've got to wait 400 years for the New Testament after that.
Yeah. Or next week.
No, the Philemon.
Philemon.
Philemon, yeah.
New Testament.
Well, you know, it's only about a chapter.
Yeah, no, I only clocked them the other day.
It's been in there for a while.
Yeah, but no, I seen it and I was like,
where's that come from? See, that's one of these books that you turn the pages, and if you're not careful, you turn 2 pages and you miss it. It's gone. Same with Jude. Jude's another one.
Didn't you meet her in Sophie Hall Street?
Aye. Interesting one. Okay. All right, we'll hopefully come across Philemon next week. Okay. Any questions? You doing all right? Are you frozen yet?
yeah.
Okay, well, I'll let you go home and get warmed up before you catch your death of cold.
The thing that amazes me, I'm just standing up there in the chair.
Aye.
He's standing up there in the chair.
See,
my thing.
us from the northeast of Scotland, see, this is almost like summer.